Hey everyone, just wanted to give you a heads up that due to the length of the podcast that we recorded, we did break this up into two shows. So this is part one that you are going to listen to, episode 156. So you can check out part two of this show, episode 157, as the follow-up. But again, just because of the length, we did split it up into two shows. So with that said, thanks for listening, and away we go.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
I am your host, Giles Farrell. Over there somewhere is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, we are back, and we have not one, not two, but three guests on this podcast to make up for our 2-week absence. Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. We don't usually roll out that many guests because we usually don't have equipment that works for that many guests.
No, that's always a concern, is our equipment. Some people think it's a running bit of this podcast. We're actually serious when we say that.
And it has stopped being funny to us a long time ago.
Joining us this evening, or afternoon or morning, however you're listening to this podcast, first of which is our most frequent guest this season, joining us for the 4th time, is Derek Peterson, who writes every once in a while as advanced stats piece for The Athletic. Derek, are you on the other line?
I am here. Has it actually been 4 times already? Yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
It has. Everyone, you have come on and you filled me with optimism, and in the weeks that follow, I just somehow get very, very lower after that. So
I remember the last time I was on, and you said towards the end, like, well, I think Derek's kind of turned me around, and I think the Wild can maybe do something in this series against the Jets, and then like they promptly lose 2 games like in convincing fashion, and it's just like, well, I tried.
Yep. But you will have done the Lord's work with me when you start to fill me with optimism on the Vikings. But for another time, we'll save that.
Somebody has to.
Also joining us is I guess I don't know how to talk anymore. I'm sorry. I'm just going to cut this out. Try again. And then also joining Derek as a guest this week, you know them as the Evolving Wild Twitter account. They are Josh and Luke. Guys, how's it going?
Not bad. Yeah, it's going all right.
Now, we were discussing this before the show, but do you guys by chance happen to have a third-person announcement you like to make?
Not currently, I guess. No, I don't want to keep it cryptic. There's only 2 of us,
Yeah.
This is
Our mom couldn't handle more than 2,
yeah.
So that was it.
We were also before the show started, we were just kind of laughing about how no one else has heard us together at the same time on a podcast before.
Yeah.
We've done.
So us talking together over each other right now, I think is proof that we're
both
2
here.
people.
There's 2 people. We're twins. We're not lying anymore. We still feel a little bit bad about how we did that whole thing, and I don't know. It's a long thing, but
water
now,
under the bridge.
Yeah, water under the bridge. But yeah, now I'm Josh. He's Luke. We run the Volume Wild Twitter account. And no, we don't have a triplet. I'm sorry. I guess we'll crush those rumors. Just stop them right now. If there were any.
What's funny is you guys made that announcement. It was like I think it was like a Friday or something. Like it was right before a weekend, and I went away. I was cut off, and I came back like Sunday night or Monday morning. And everyone was talking about this, and it took me about 20 minutes to figure out what the hell was going on, because for once, the stupid Twitter, in case you missed it, didn't put that into my feed.
Yeah, that was probably kind of funny.
Yeah, I think it was on a Saturday afternoon. I don't think much was going on. It was a thing because we had to first. We're also, if anyone has been following us, you know that we write some articles for Hockey Graphs on the blog and do some other stuff on Twitter. But we let them all know first, and it was like it was fun. Like they thought it was just like because it was in our kind of conversation with them, and they all thought it was just like they couldn't. It was like mind blown kind of stuff, and so when we were really kind of nervous when we did the whole reveal and whatnot, but it was funny,
but it went pretty well.
Yeah, and it was there was a lot of for about a week we got a lot of responses about it and people just having their viewpoints of it.
Yeah, but anyway, enough about us.
I think the Twitter reaction to it was pretty great though. Like there was. I don't think anybody was. I'm sure you guys caught some negativity, but I think for the most part, it became kind of a joke / meme right away, and that was kind of fun for a little while.
It was definitely a meme. A lot of the Eric Andre in the on top of somebody's shoulders in the giant trench coat.
Yeah,
and then the golden retriever that pops out from underneath the other one. That was the other one.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
And then of course the Spider-Man, pointing at
each other. Yeah.
That one was a big one. I'm trying to think if there's another one, but it was mostly, and then there was a lot of just general using our thing as towards other people. It was pretty funny. It went very well considering kind of where we had been and what we had been doing. So yeah, it was pretty funny.
So since we have everybody here, we're going to kind of have a little more of a kind of analytical kind of approach to this podcast, since we have guests who specialize in more of the analytical figures of hockey. So this should be fun. Before we dive into the topics we have as we kick off the Minnesota Wild offseason, a few bits of Minnesota Wild news while Ben and I were away since we last recorded. Jack Ferreira named a special assistant to the general manager, and Dean Evason, I don't know, I've never heard that said before, so I hope I'm saying that right, is the new assistant coach. John Anderson not retained by the Wild. Does anyone have any hot takes on this?
Ryan Suter did it.
Hearty chuckle, yeah.
And then Zach Parisi's going to fire him, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And bring in Adam Oates.
Yeah, I don't think there's, I don't know, the whole Avison hire and Anderson, I guess you could call it firing. I don't know. It's a little weird. I mean, Avison worked with Boudreau in Washington, so it's not that weird that he was hired. John Anderson being touted as Boudreau's close friend being let go is a little interesting, but I don't know. I'm kind of willing to give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that it wasn't like a stone cold, get your ass out of here, you did a bad job kind of firing. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but it seems like a weird move for Fedden to do so coldly right away before he even really has had a chance to work with Boudreau. So if there's conspiracy theories out there, which I'm sure there's some parody Twitter accounts that are pointing that direction, but not naming any names, but I don't know. I don't necessarily buy into it. I think there was probably a logical reason for that particular coaching move, and I'm not really all that worried about it.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I wasn't really stunned by it. I was mostly disappointed because I don't know. There's something about John Anderson. Like, he just looks like that nice, grandpa that you have who always has, candy for you or something. Like,
full of Werther's.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever he's on the broadcast, and they show him behind the bench, and he's talking to a player, I just imagine that he's always just like, "Well, how was your weekend? How's the family? How are the kids?" That's what I saw him as. So for my own personal enjoyment, I'm upset to see him go. But I don't really buy into the whole conspiracy theories about getting rid of him. Obviously, it's awkward that he was Boudreau's buddy and friend, and they've been together for a while, but. I kind of see this as maybe Fenton's first way of being like, all right, I'm in charge now. This is what we're doing. We're going to change things up. So
the bloody head on a fence post is what you're saying?
What's that?
The bloody head on a fence post?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think it's kind of hard to judge I mean, for me anyway, and maybe Luke too, for like Judge the assistant or like anyone who's not Boudreaux. I think he was kind of
he did the power play, right?
Power play and then the forwards, right? Wasn't that kind of his area?
So, yeah.
And I don't know, it kind of makes sense a little bit when I can see it, because I think that one of the things the Wild struggled with the most was like offense from their forwards, honestly. Like at least the bottom six possibly, which I don't think was really his fault. I think the players just weren't as good as they had been in years past. But yeah, I mean, I think that I've been kind of bad at following like all of the coaching hires, because it's kind of like you want to wait a little bit or at least I want to sometimes wait for like kind of the dust to settle to see where everyone is and like fits in. So I think it's kind of hard to judge some of these. But yeah, I think it's kind of like I didn't have necessarily a problem with him, but it does seem like if a new GM is coming in, it makes sense that he would kind of get his own guys, so to speak, in there.
Yeah, and it's always weird as a fan, like seeing these assistant coaches, because like as a fan, you don't ever get to know them. Like they don't get TV time. They get like maybe a 20-second interview on Fox Sports North, like in between periods, and that's about it. So when one of them gets let go, it's pretty easy not to have like any major attachments to it and not overreact, I guess.
Maybe last season the Wild were so good because they had one assistant coach, as Derek said, who was that lovable grandpa figure in John Anderson. And then they had the exact opposite in Scott Stevens, who was just a real hard ass.
I don't know, was Stevens even a hard ass, though? We saw him drinking red wine, so.
I don't know. I just assume he is because of how he plays. And I could sit here and talk about how terrible I didn't like him back in that day.
I was going to say, you're just saying that because of Paul Correa.
No, okay.
No, I think if anything, it's a good sign that Fenton is not loyal to hiring anybody's best friend. So maybe we'll see a buyout soon.
Who would that be?
Fingers crossed.
I would
that
possibly be
throwing it out there.
Oh, I wonder.
Oh, you're talking about Craig Leopold's best friend, Ryan Suter? Man, that's an expensive buyout.
Yeah, it's the risky buyout, but that ankle is just it's too messed up. Got to buy him out.
Oh no!
I mean, if you actually go down that road of what it looks like to buy out Suter, and I know that we're joking here, but
I've
is like
done it. It
yeah,
looks
yeah.
It is. What is it? How many years is that? What is it? 4.5 would be on against the cap for how many years?
I'm looking at it right now. So
years?
like
14 more years.
I think. Yeah, I
mean, let's be honest though.
It ends in 2031 and 32.
Cap friendly is
honestly, if they're going to buy out a player, like it would be breezy over Suter, in my opinion. That would be
which is still absurd.
Yeah, which would be also equally would be the same thing.
Because if Suter's ankle thing is as serious as it possibly could be, they could just do the whole Marian Hossa deal and be like, "Oops, he can't play anymore." Darn.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean,
so the interesting thing is that it's only really bad in like the 2022 and 2023 season, where in 2024, where it's like 7 million, 8 million, and 8 million is like the buyout cap hit. But other than that, it's like 3 million, 1 million, and then a bunch of 1 millions. So, if you can get them past that point and then buy them out, maybe that's going to have to be the road that they take, assuming the CBA is identical, which it most likely will not be.
Yeah, I need to just clear the air and say that I am not in favor in any way of buying out Suter right now.
Definitely not.
Anybody sane is. I would hope.
Yeah.
Is anyone else just like slightly terrified when you hear certain beat writers go like on TV or radio and they're saying if Suter returns? Like, am I the only one who hears that if and like alarms are going off?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't picked up on that, but if you have, I'm gonna trust you and I would be maybe because what, he broke like some obscure bone in his ankle that's gonna like he maybe couldn't they were saying he would in any other sport he potentially would just be done, right?
Right.
That's really scary. And I mean, I don't know. I think Suter is kind of one of those players. I still think that he has a lot more in him just in terms of how he plays. So it would be a really big loss for the Wild if he didn't come back. I mean,
when you saw what the defense looked like, granted it is Winnipeg, but what the decor looked like against Winnipeg, like that was not.
Yeah.
Nah, you don't want that.
Right.
No. All All right, so I guess here as we're kind of talking about Ryan Suter potentially not returning, that could maybe fall in the pessimistic column of what we're all kind of looking for reasons to be optimistic / pessimistic for the Wild here as they head into the offseason. I will throw it to Derek here to kind of kick that one off.
As far as reasons to be pessimistic?
Yeah, let's start with
I don't know if I'm a great start, but
people love pessimistic.
No, I just think like the main fear is kind of like the same offseason that we saw last year, where the Wild makes a bunch of bad trades and you get strapped with bad players. I don't think the Wild could endure another offseason like they had last year and make the playoffs again. So you just kind of have to put all your faith in Paul Fenton, hope that he knows what he's doing, and it's. Because, we're still seeing the repercussions of Chuck Fletcher's last offseason. Like, we still have Tyler Ennis, who's probably going to be bought out after 1 year. We have Marcus Foligno, who I think the Evolving Wild guys are way bigger or higher on him than I think anybody that has watched hockey ever. And then, there's Matt. The Matt Cullen experiment failed pretty well. You have... your prospect pool is lighter, so I think you just have to. It's easy to say like don't do the things you did last off season, but I think you really just have to trust Paul Fenton to make the right moves and not screw it up for a second year in a row.
I'll throw it to the Evolving Wild guys to respond to the Marcus Foligno claim.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll say that I've been, we have a tendency to run some numbers over here. And I don't know. I just keep seeing Foligno come out just a lot better than what most people see, I think.
Well, I think the thing with him was a lot of people were, at least for a little bit of time, it was a little bit funny because it's like we weren't, I think he's vastly overpaid, but from a production standpoint, I heard a lot of people mid-season before the Stewart left was like the argument was like Chris Stewart is better than Foligno or like they're comparable. So like my thing was like he's overpaid, but as a fourth line guy he kind of adds a lot of value on
even third line. I'd say Foligno is closer to average than most people think.
And it's like from a defensive standpoint in his shorthanded D, it was like totally good. Like he was solid.
Oh, but he didn't kill penalties, which is what he should have been doing.
He should have because he did in Buffalo. So like it's kind of a weird thing. It's like I don't necessarily think like Foligno's like he's not like a world beater, but he's for what you get in the bottom six. Like he's pretty good. He's just like about $1 million overpaid probably.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It was Marcus Foligno seems like a decent guy to put on the fourth line. It just he was overpaid a little bit and given a contract that was maybe 2 years too long, something like that.
Yeah.
But,
no, totally. And it doesn't really like change the fact that like Derek's absolutely right that like the Wild have no place or they can't afford to have an offseason like what last offseason was.
Yeah.
So
and I think just in terms of like pessimistic, like I don't know, I can kind of continue that. I think that probably the most like if you really want to see the bad things, this kind of goes both ways with optimistic and pessimistic. Is that like Eck doesn't turn into anything, and Greenway doesn't turn in. I mean, it's literally like if Sealer, I think Sealer was actually really good in the short time he played last year. But if like Sealer and Soucy, and then especially Eck, Cunnin, and Greenway aren't anything, then I think like the team should like. I mean, that would be really bad because they don't have any other depth, and that would be probably one of the main reasons to be pessimistic. On top of the fact that Suter could potentially, he's having some type of career-threatening injury right now, and their depth in the back end is just like a very unknown right now. So it's either like I think Brodin is perfectly, it's perfectly acceptable for him to step into a top pairing role, but I think that if the young players aren't who you think they are, then that's a big problem.
Yeah, because I mean the Wild are so top heavy right now as far as their scoring production. Like or as far as contracts go, like they really need guys on cheap contracts to produce, or otherwise, I mean they will not be able to compete whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess to add to that, it is I think like Luke already said this, but in a way, but it is just because, and this is getting into something else, which is I think goes the other way, and I don't know if you want to hop to the optimism, but I think because we have so little with, I think the three biggest, maybe four now after Steelers play last year, but like, your three probably top, Kaprizov, we can be sad about that, but he's not, in the picture. But, if Eck, like Luke said, Eck, Greenway, and Cunningham, like we don't have enough, and Eck was basically played fourth line minutes, like pretty much the whole year. They tried him in a third line and then like once or twice in the top six, but they're the big unknowns, and I think that's the thing that I don't really think that you, at least in my opinion, you won't really want to start talking about trading any of those players because you really don't have a clue what they are right now. So if they just completely tank, then I don't think the Wild, I think they're probably just missing the playoffs and they're not doing anything.
I do think it's entirely possible that one of those players gets dealt, though. I mean, and not that it is a good idea or a bad idea, because, yeah, you don't know what you have, and you kind of are selling a little bit low. But I could see it. Yeah, I could see it if Fenton really is kind of, if it's the quote-unquote tweak that he needs, and another team asks for one of those players. I mean, Greenway especially, because I think his sample size was so minuscule that you really can't say you're selling low on him, and I would hope they would still get a lot of return for him, given the prospect that he was before his debut last year. I could see it. Again, not that it's necessarily a great idea, but I could see one of them being dealt.
Yeah, I think that just generally there's a couple ways they could go. If they're trying to really win now, I could see them, selling low on somebody like that.
Or selling unknown.
Or not selling low, but like basically trading Greenway or Cunningham. I probably don't think they're trading Eck just because he has a lot of time and Bruce seems to like him. But like if they want to win now, say they're like trying to just shoot for the go just big, then I think that it's possible that one of those players gets traded. Just because, or the other option would be you don't do that and you give those players second line minutes and see what you have. And that's probably the other route that they could go.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, Eriksson Ek, somebody threw it out there. He was essentially on the fourth line all year, and, he didn't exactly have the greatest of line mates. And it felt like those two games he got actually put into the top six, that lasted for all of, two combined periods as Bruce switched around the lineup at intermission. So I would love to see those kids thrown into bigger roles and see what they have. And, I guess to kind of finish the pessimistic part of the discussion, something I noted in an article I wrote for Zone Coverage was the last 5 drafts, 2013 through 2017, the Wild have had. That's 5, right?
Sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Close enough.
That's why you guys are here, for the math.
Yeah.
Let me get my spreadsheet.
So through 2013 through 2017, the Wild had a pick in each of those rounds, and they ended up only using 5 of those picks, as the other 5 were traded away in various deals, and that's kind of where we're seeing the lineup suffer, as they don't have these younger players on more friendly deals who you can plug into the lineup, and instead you're having to go out and fill them with 43-year-old Matt Cullen, who just kind of water skis his way down the ice. So,
ooh, you're not making any friends in northern Minnesota today, Joe.
I think it's it is kind of unfortunate because I think Cullen, he was pretty good, and then just fell. He was really bad last year, really, really bad. And same thing with Winnick. I think, he had been pretty decent from a fourth line, defensive standpoint, I think, historically, but both him and Cullen just were not what the Wild needed last year, and especially Cullen. I mean, he just had a really, really rough season, which that makes it hard.
Is he? Did he announce retirement? I can't remember.
Does anybody know?
I don't think we've heard anything official yet.
Yeah, he's gonna milk this out and maybe see what's out there again.
He's on the Favre plan. I think that the lack of depth for the Wild is really what kind of hurt those. I think it affected Eriksson Ek and Cullen a little bit too, because like you mentioned, Eriksson Ek didn't have great line mates. He was paired up with Stewart and Foligno a lot, and apologies to Evolving Wild, but that's two boat anchors to me.
Oh, yeah.
That's just not setting up somebody for success. So I'm interested to see what he could do with something different, and if the depth on the Wild gets a little bit better, then even if you do see youngsters kind of put in a third line, fourth line role, maybe they do produce a little bit more if you have a little more depth, which having a healthier season would be a big part of that too, because the injuries really kind of crushed the depth as much as Chuck Fletcher did last year. So,
And to add on to that, I think that, and this kind of goes to another point was with Eck, is that I was kind of going on about this is about I think it might be time. At least Eriksson Ek's the one player I think that I would just automatically say we're giving you second line minutes. You're going to have to talk to Koivu, but I think that you need to start to drop Koivu down out of his top six role. I love Koivu, but he's just getting older and he doesn't really add the offense that he did the last few seasons. And so I think just go with, in my opinion, Ek in the second line. I mean, you kind of just need to see what he can do given, if you put him with Zucker and Granlund or Nino or whoever. So.
Yeah, that's one thing that the Wild don't seemingly ever do is like they, bring up their hot young prospect and then, they just put him on the fourth line and he just kind of stays there forever. They don't give him like the Jake Gensel treatment where he gets to go out and, play first line minutes like his first game. So it would be really refreshing to see something like that happen next year. And I hope it will, but I just don't see it happening exactly unless there's, some pretty major trades.
Or Fenton, he's changing up the organization, 100% kind of thing.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, I don't know that Boudreau makes that kind of move, though. That's to your guys' point.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other thing. The other potential issue with Boudreau is that it seems like he has a tough time putting younger players in those positions. Like, it seemed like, I think he would put, Greenway would get, the first or second game, he'd be on the second line, and then he'd drop him down immediately. Or, Ek, it's like, I don't know. I just think that he should have been, getting more opportunities than what he was doing. And I have a hard time thinking that, a general manager can really make that change.
Right.
Just because it's like Boudreau, what is it going to be like, what Billy Bean in Moneyball, trading these players that, that he doesn't want to play on the team. I just don't think that. I don't know what you're supposed to do if Boudreau isn't giving these younger players a chance. So I don't know. It's kind of a tough one to see who you place why, because it's like you see Vrana on the Capitals, right? I don't know how much time he was playing, but that kid's fast and he was looking really good in the Cup final and, throughout the playoffs. So it's I don't know exactly how he compares, but I just watching him, I thought that kid looked really good. And he's 22 or 23. So it's you kind of see that you really should. I feel like once a player gets into their 21, 22 age range, that's perfectly fine to start putting them in a position, especially given the makeup of the team.
So I guess on the flip side of the pessimistic, why should we be optimistic moving forward? And I will throw it to Ben to start.
Like they said, it's kind of a two-sided coin with Fenton coming in because you don't know what he's going to do. You would kind of hope that he makes some moves to improve the Wild depth versus gutting it like Fletcher sort of did last summer. And I think the injuries were a big part of it too, and it's easy to blame them, for a lot of things. But I think there's a very real, they were for the first time in this era of the Wild, they were pretty decimated by injuries, and not even so much as a man games lost like Breezy, but look at Charlie Coyle, who was an absolute shadow of his former self because of 2 wrist injuries, and Nino, same thing. I mean, Nino was on such an upward trajectory before he broke his leg. and continued to play through it, but obviously wasn't the same player. So I think there's reason to be optimistic with individual players that had disappointing years. I think there's reason to be optimistic with kind of a new voice at the helm and maybe a guy who is more willing to make that hockey trade that Fletcher seemingly was completely unable to make. That's really kind of all they have. I mean, you can't suddenly expect Zach Parise and Ryan Seward to turn into, some kind of, superstar tandem again that's going to carry this team. That's not what's going to bring this team forward. They're going to play their roles for sure. But I think you just kind of have to look for big-time bounce-back seasons and maybe a very shrewd addition this summer.
So it's hard for me right now to kind of pick out exactly what would make me optimistic for this team next year. And I don't mean that in there's no hope and this team is awful, but it's just so hard to foresee what this team is going to be in 3 months. I think it's going to have a totally different feel and a different look. There's going to be small trades that definitely need to be made. There's going to be the draft. There's going to be re-signings of restricted guys. Maybe they move some of the restricted guys like Matt Dumba, Jason Zucker. There's undrafted free agents that they need to address. I mean, there's just so many different things that need to happen before we finally are even close to what this team is going to look like when the season starts. So it's really hard for me, but I still think you have to be excited about guys like Niederreiter and Granlund. Those two guys should be the face of this franchise going forward. I love Koivu, I love Parise, but every year we kind of hear it's time for the young core to take some responsibility or take action and take over this team. And I think we finally need to actually see that from some of the play. Koivu's 33, Parise's 33, Suter's 33. They cannot be the driving force that wills this team to the playoffs every single year. So I think I'm mostly excited just to see kind of the young guys that we've seen grow in the past few years, potentially take another step forward.
Yeah, and I guess Josh here, I'll round this out on our end. I think from an optimism, what both Ben and Derek, you guys have kind of pointed out, but I think that especially the Wild, if we go with Suter is going to be back to kind of his normal self, fingers crossed. I still think the Wild have one of the better top four groups from a defenseman side in the league. Honestly, I think there's Nashville, there's the Ducks. I think are kind of a sneaky really good defense, but I think the Wild are in definitely top 5 territory in terms of just the strength of their defensive core. And then you also have Sealer again, and then I think that up and down their 6 or their 3 pairs are very solid. And then on the forward end, I do still think, like Derek said, you have Nino and Granlund, and then I think Zucker specifically drives offense like no one else on the team. So there are some players who are still, if you get Zucker signed and you get Dumba signed, which some people might kind of bat an eye at, or maybe not necessarily because they want to see a change that involves maybe trading Dumba or Zucker, which I'm not a fan of, but but there are still really good players. And then, I think the optimism is I have a hard time thinking that Eck isn't going to be a very good, a very serviceable top 6 center if you give him the time and you give him the line mates to play with. And he, it's going to take a little bit of time. I was worried last season because they just, we've been talking about already. It was just 4th line only, all defense, no offense. Just go out and just completely basically mirror kind of what Koivu was doing, which is fine. I mean, that's great. But I think from him, you saw it when he first came up, a little bit of that offensive side of his game. And that's what you want from someone like him, I think. So I think the Wild still have some really good players, but I think the big one, and I guess we're talking about optimism, so I'm not going to put that out there. But that's what I think, that their defensive group is really solid. Very, very, very good, in my opinion. And then the forwards, you have a couple guys that I think completely fill out your top 6 from a good group, And I think that just, if you don't want to take into account the problems in the locker room and maybe maybe you just need to shake things up kind of thing, that still I think is kind of a good why Wild fans should be optimistic.
And then I will add to the optimism by saying, I have none. I'm dead inside.
Yeah, I don't know. I just want to add that I think you could be optimistic. Just I think Nino specifically had a really down year last year, and I think that just from a numbers standpoint, like regardless of how you look at it, I think he's actually kind of in an elite forward type winger type position in my mind from a number standpoint. And I think that if maybe Fenton takes because it sounds like the analytics department is still there. And I don't know, maybe he takes a little bit more interest and he tries to kind of get Boudreaux's ear about playing him more. Because we go on about this forever, but Nino gets 14, 15 minutes a game at all situations. And it's I don't know why he's not an 18 or 19 a minute, player on the team. I just don't really understand it. And so I think that if, they kind of shake up the roster construction and how they're giving minutes to players, that I think that there's definitely still a lot of talent on the team. And it just kind of, they ran into probably the best team in the Western Conference in the playoffs and, kind of without Suter or Parisi or whoever else was hurt. It's just, I don't know. I think that the playoffs leave a lot of recency bias in terms of what the team looks like and what you feel about the team. But so I don't know. I think if some players bounce back, that there's a lot of possibility for, a much better performance next year, like 2 seasons ago, kind of.
Well, I think the maddening thing with Niederreiter, kind of going back to that, was, last summer he signed that 5-year extension, paying him, the $5.25 million cap hit, and Chuck Fletcher was quoted as saying, okay, we can't hide him in the lineup anymore. He's got to play bigger minutes because he's making bigger dollars, and his bigger minutes lasted all of 3 games before he got hurt, and then he seemingly could never get more minutes when he came back, and down the stretch when he was seemingly playing pretty well, he could never crack that 15-minute plateau that eluded him. So I never understand it either, and hopefully a fresh set of eyes, like you said, this year will maybe benefit him in getting more minutes. But speaking of Nino Niederreiter, who are you guys looking for as trade candidates on the Wild roster? Niederreiter comes up often, maybe much to our dismay, but he does maybe have a little bit of value out there. So who is everybody looking at moving? And I'll throw it to Evolving Wild, whether Josh or Luke want to hit that first.
I guess I'll just start here by this is Josh. I'm not quite sure how to specifically approach this. The listeners can maybe not get confused, but maybe that's just kind of a lost cause.
A little bit.
I think from a trade standpoint, I think is kind of so. Just specifically the question was, you were just looking who should the Wild target if they were looking to move somebody?
Yeah,
on the Wild team, who should they trade?
On the Wild team, who should they trade?
Yeah, because everyone's Charlie Coyle is the name that's been beaten like a dead horse already. Early this summer, and maybe that's the move they make. Maybe that's that's kind of selling low, but maybe that's the move. But what are your guys' kind of numbers and thoughts kind of tell you that the Wild, if they're going to move anyone, who do you think it should be?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's a little bit. There's a reason that Coyle's name is up. I think that
I would say Coyle.
Yeah. No. That's I'm getting there, bro. The number. I would say right away, Coyle is the top of the list in my opinion in terms of who they would, I think, want to move to try and kind of get something new in there. I think that I feel like his value is probably higher in the market than where he actually should be valued. So I feel like there's some you can get kind of make up some value in terms of that trade, because I think that there's a lot of teams. I would think there's at least a handful of teams, if not more, who are the Wild have screwed him up. They don't know how to play this guy.
Well, and
he's a big forward. We all have seen the flashes of Coyle, but it just doesn't ever seem to and it's not like it's because Bruce treats Coyle kind of above Nino, at least from what I've
way above Nino,
Yeah.
way above.
Yeah.
Like, how many times did we see like the Wild need like a top 6 guy in a pinch, and it's Coyle
yeah.
that
And
gets the minutes, and then Nino's
he's-
like on the third line, and it's just like, what the hell are we doing?
I know, and that's
Information lists.
Let us
I
all
was
take a.
Coyle is the number one, I think, from my standpoint, and then I think second, like I don't really like the idea of. I don't think there's a lot of other guys in the team that you're going to get the proper value out of. I think Nino, in my opinion, right now is very undervalued in the market, and I don't think you're going to get a good return unless there's.
I would say same thing. I think both Nino and Zucker are very undervalued in terms of like what other teams, at least from like seeing how other fans seem to think about these players. I think that Zucker is way better than most people know. And I think that we've been kind of shouting Nino's praises for long enough that maybe some people kind of are starting to see that. But I think Zucker, in terms of like, I think he's a really, really underrated player. I think one time I said that, Jason Zucker's like Victor Arvidsson if Arvidsson could play defense. Like that's like, like Arvidsson gets a lot of national attention, but I think Zucker, he's pretty, he's like, he's in that like Phil Kessel, like, kind of Vanek, Jeff Skinner, John Tavares type offensive player mold where they're actually pretty bad defensively. So Zucker is actually really, really good in his own end, I think.
He's kind of in his own way, like kind of like a Tyler Toffoli, like maybe a couple of years ago, kind of that realm. But not to go too long on our end, but number one is Coyle. I think after that, I think because they're a little stronger on the left side, I would consider Brodin front, and I think that he has. I still think he's kind of a little undervalued, but I think that I think they have the guys to replace Brodin, even though I really like Brodin. And then I guess my third option, and this is Luke and I have been talking about this a little bit, is I don't really like this, but I think if you really want to go for a big move, like, and given how he's the shorter of the contracts a little bit, I think that Granlund is somebody that I don't want to trade Granlund, but I could see if another team really likes how he plays, and you can get a player like, say, Mark Stone, for instance, or something. So like if you can get a type of player that is that kind of good, I guess that would be, or Draisaitl, for instance, is somebody. If you could get a package with Granlund and a D for Draisaitl, like I think that's probably out of the question. But that's another player I think is maybe somebody that I could see.
Nothing is out of the question with Peter Chiarelli.
You stole my joke, Ben.
No, yeah. Nothing.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all.
No, I'll jump right in, I guess. I think for me, like, I pretty much agree with everything they said. I think if you look at, like, a guy on this roster that the Wild should just probably be ready to move on from, and I think it's definitely Charlie Coyle. We've heard, like, potential trade rumors for him for, like, the past 3 years, and, I've always kind of been, like, a Charlie Coyle truther. Like, I always thought the Wild would be selling really low on Coyle because he's has this incredible skill in you. Like you said, you see flashes of it all the time, or maybe not all the time, but often enough to remind you that, this guy has the potential to be a good player, but he just has never been able to put it together consistently. And it's just gotten to the point where I just think the team needs a fresh start, and he probably needs a fresh start also. But I think maybe the one guy that, if you're the Wild, and probably the player that you would get the most value for, I think right now might be Eric Staal. The only reason I think the Wild should not trade Eric Staal before the season is that I think he would be a really valuable piece at the trade deadline next year. Like, if you think Marty Hansel went for like a first-round pick 2 years ago, like, think what Eric Staal can get you at the trade deadline next year if he's got like 20 goals or something. I think he's just you're going to get solid value if you move on from him. And he's only got, it's the best contract in the NHL by far is Eric Staal. And I think any team would be happy to have like a potential 40-goal scorer for, what's this, like $3.5 million or something. And then like the Nino thing, I just keep hearing it in the news, like on the radio, on articles. And I wish it would die in a fire because it just infuriates me so much. Like if that's like your strategy, like, hey, we'll sign this guy. I understand that it's a new GM now, but like, we'll sign this guy who we think has, all this skill and potential to like a pretty decent sized contract. And then we'll play him in the bottom 6. And then we'll trade him 1 year later after he had like injuries. It just that doesn't seem like a smart play at all. And I absolutely loathe every time I turn on the radio and they're talking about Nino Niederreiter potentially getting traded, because I think any team would just be happy to steal him away from the Wild.
Yeah, they take him and then they put him in their top. They give him like 20 minutes a night, and he just
exactly.
He's like
that's
the
why
next
you
guy
don't listen to
all,
local sports radio, Derek.
I was literally about to ask Derek, what radio station are you turning on that's talking hockey?
That's a good question too. Actually, I should just podcast radio. I mean, it's I can't get away from it.
Podcast. Like. Sorry. Going back to Charlie Coyle, let us all just take a brief moment of silence for Charlie Coyle on the point on the power play. And Ben, anything to add to the trade people, or did they kind of hit it all for you there?
Yeah, they did, and I think, of all the intrigue that this offseason is going to have, I think the biggest intrigue is there going to be a hockey trade? And it certainly seems like they're really motivated to make one. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that's the biggest thing. I mean, they could crush it in the draft, and that's really not going to affect the next season a whole lot. And we know they can't really do a whole lot in free agency, other than obviously re-signing Dumba and Zucker. But that's the big question this summer: is who are they going to trade, and what are they going to get back? And if that's if it's a big trade, if that's the tweaks that they're looking for. So I don't know. That's the biggest thing for me. I think I'm not saying that they shouldn't trade Charlie Coyle. I think his contract is so palatable, and he still has enough potential where other teams be interested in him. But I don't know that, and I don't know. I mean, last season was such a abortion for him. I don't know that he was going to get a ton of value back. Maybe he will. It'd be great if he could. But I'm very interested to see what they end up doing. If they trade a Granlund type or God forbid a Nino type.
So this player, to kind of throw in my 2 cents on trade Wild players who maybe not should, but maybe will be traded here, is this player I'm about to toss out has the equivalent for me to what Derek just said with Nino, as I wish it to die 1,000 deaths, and that's Matt Dumba. And that's really creeping into the news feeds, and it's driving me up a tree. And so I will just say this on trading Matt Dumba is 50-point defensemen who are right-handed shot at the age of 23 don't grow on trees. In fact, they are pretty rare. So if you're trading Matt Dumba, you better be sure what you're getting back, because you're essentially going to cripple yourself on the right side behind Jared Spurgeon. With all respect to Louis Belpedio and our beloved son, Nate Prosser.
Don't forget they're going to re-sign Ryan Murphy, too, on the right side to really fill in that second pair.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
You guys see Police tweet, and I retweeted, where he wrote an article about Matt Dumba actually being good, and then, of course, the lovely Hockey Wilderness Facebook commenters came out in full force. And this was the perfect analogy. Matt Dumba traders amongst Wild fans are like the flat earthers. No amount of evidence can change their mind.
Yeah, and just I was gonna say, I think that Josh and I, we kind of do dabble in the contract projections and stuff, and we had a model basically that projected him at around $5.5 million, which I think that if you can sign Matt Dumba for 5 or 6 years at $5.5 million, you do that right now.
You could trip over yourself.
Yeah, you lock that down, because I think that I've seen some fans where Dumba for Ristolainen, right?
Oh my God,
Ristolainen's really undervalued because he's buried in Buffalo. It's you guys don't understand how bad Ristolainen is in a lot of other than the power play. Ristolainen is just a nightmare at even strength, and it's I think that's the if you're trying to maybe target a guy like Klefbom, well, I think that Dumba is better than Klefbom. So, you're going to need to be getting something else back. And I don't know. I can never remember. Is Klefbom right-handed?
I think, yeah, he's right.
Yeah,
he's
right-handed.
I believe he is, yeah.
Okay.
But,
I can't remember.
I think that the other thing with Dumba is that it's I would only consider Dumba if you are really, you're like, well, we're going to get the type of player that we need. Because I will admit that they have some room to shed some defense if they want to add forward offense. Because that was one of the big things I again thought they struggled with was just their offense. They were one of the best top 2 or 3 defensive teams in the league. But that, look where that got them because they just didn't have the kind of offense. So it's like if you think you're going to get a player that is better than you've ever really had on the team kind of thing. Like, honestly, like maybe Parisi in his first 3 years with the Wild or Koivu in a couple of years. But like players who are at that level or better, then I would, if there's another team who's willing to trade, like I've said, Draisaitl, but I don't know, who knows who else. But that's the only time that top tier, like top 30 forward that you need for your first line. That's the only situation I would even consider hearing a Dumba trade. Because not only do I think he's not valued properly, or I think he's undervalued, but like I just like
he's 23.
He's 23, and then
right.
you have no one to come in and fill on your second or third pair. Like you don't want
other than Nate Prosser.
Yeah, I mean
Second pair.
and he's fine on the third. I don't have a problem with Prosser on the third pair, but you don't want to give him or Belpio or who like Murphy or whoever else you're going to get in a trade. Like I just don't like that at all.
Yeah. Also, Clefbaum is a left shot. I looked it up. So any Oilers fans who are listening, sorry about that.
I was thinking of Larson. Larson's the right shot, right?
Yeah. Larson's. That's the why I think they went for that. Yeah. But
another thing I had seen was like going back to like the Dumba trade talks was like maybe you trade Dumba and then you pick up a right shot guy in free agency, and I think the example was like John Carlson, and I fell out of my chair. It's like. You can trade your 50-point 23-year-old guy and then sign John Carlson to I don't know who his contract's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah,
he'll probably make $6.5 million a year for 7 years and just
we have him right now at 7 point almost 7.9.
Yeah, that's I mean
I think that Matt Cain has that around there too. It's around $8 million is what he's projecting out to make.
Yeah,
which after winning the Stanley Cup. He's
it's crazy.
Gonna get it, yeah, maybe, probably.
John Carlson will need all $7.9 million next year just to pay off the bar tabs from Saturday afternoon.
I have really enjoyed those videos.
Yeah, it's been
amazing. It's
outstanding.
Wonderful. But we're gonna come to that in a minute. But I guess so. Now we've kind of talked about Wild players who should not be moved. What players around the league are you guys kind of looking at, maybe hoping the Wild maybe make a call on, or hope they stay away? Don't, if somebody calls on this player, don't pick up the phone. You guys were talking about Ristolainen, and don't do that. And then on the flip side, we were talking about, I don't even remember. I have terrible memory. But anyway.
No.
Who would you guys like to see the Wild maybe make a call on in trade talks?
Well, I mean, I think our ideal, probably 2 players. I think that just because he's due for a contract, and Luke and I both love him so much, and I don't. This might be complete because I've only heard that other players, but Mark Stone I think is one of my dream players to have on the Wild. I think, and I think Luke.
Yeah. I think that if that's one of the players, I would potentially be willing to give up any person on the team to trade. If you can trade for Mark Stone, I would, if they're going to try to move Nino, if that's really what they're trying to do, then the only player I probably, as a Wild fan, would be happy with would be maybe Draisaitl and then Mark Stone. I think that's... So,
but my pipe dream is a Mark Stone, or if you can somehow get Draisaitl out of Edmonton, which I think is very hard, and I don't think that Edmonton, even given Chiarelli and their history, I think you learn quite a bit from what trading a young forward who's really good for some defenseman. I just don't think that is going to get done again. That's kind of honestly my lifetime type trade, that kind of thing.
But I think also the Senators, I think
yeah, but they've been talking about Hoffman.
Hoffman is another player that I think that's he's really, really good offensively. His defense is a little questionable, but offensively, you can't really, in terms of, I think Jeff Skinner is another player that could potentially be, that I've heard his name floated, and Canes fans on Twitter are all up in arms about it. But I think if you really want, Mike Hoffman would be a fantastic add to the team. I think that's a really, if like that's another option.
And then I think lastly is the other one. We brought this up. I think it was last night. It was ROR, Ryan O'Reilly from Buffalo.
Yeah, I've been looking at the numbers a little bit
and
more, and
now
I'm not super into
We were
that
trying
now.
when I tweeted that out, I think the initial trade, and Ben, I think that you gave me. It was kind of funny because I had a couple Sabres fans that said no, we wouldn't do this, and I had Wild fans saying no, we wouldn't do this, which to me was kind of funny because like, oh, maybe this is kind of fair. I think I said, was it Coyle Brodin for ROR? Is that what it or Stahl? Was it? I think it was Stahl.
No,
Brodin.
you said Stahl, Brodin, or
for
Coyle,
ROR.
either one of those.
Yeah.
And that is a pretty even from a cap space, and I was just kind of feeling out. I was thinking, but we looked into ROR a little more, and he's good. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's $7.5 million, and you give up defenseman forward.
He never takes penalties.
Yeah,
and,
which is really
that's
strong,
another thing. But like I think just in general at even strength, he seems like not particularly like you're going to be winning that trade.
Yeah.
And now that I've been looking into it a little more,
I think just to kind of summarize on our end, maybe what you're getting from both of us is that I think that the Wild, unless they're getting a really, really good forward back, I don't really want. I want them to sign Zucker. I want them to sign Delba. I want them to keep those players, and then a few of the other ones we mentioned before. And then if you're like, I think that like outside of like a few of those other players that you're going to make a blockbuster move, I'm not really sure that you have the value that you're going to get that's there for Wild players.
Yeah.
What do you guys think on Phil Kessel, who hasn't really been linked to the Wild, but he apparently is out there because people in the Pittsburgh organization don't like him. So what is that kind of one we should stay away because he's now over 30, or is that something worth maybe taking a flyer on because he had 90-some points last year?
I heard he likes hot dogs too much. So,
Kessel's an interesting guy for me. I think what is his contract though? I have to look it up because I don't know how much longer.
I was looking at this today, and I actually tweeted cap friendly because his original contract with the Maple Leafs was $8 million cap hit, but the Maple Leafs retained $1.2 million.
Oh,
so Phil Kessel is only at $6.8 million for the next 3 years, I believe, or 3 or 4 years.
I think it's 4.
Done in 2021.
Yeah, and the retained salary is still in effect if he gets moved again.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, I think I think a lot of teams would be happy to have Phil Kessel. It kind of worries me. Like I think Phil Kessel's a good player, but I wonder what he does away from a team like Pittsburgh where he has he played a lot with Malkin, who's an elite player in this league, and he's played with Crosby some, and the Wild just don't have high level skill guys like that really. And the contract I think is a little bit scary for me too because he's 30 now. You don't know how much longer he's going to be able to produce, especially without those players. And I don't know. It always worries me because we were just talking about you want guys like Niederreiter to get more ice time. You guys want Eriksson Ek to get more ice time. And if you make these big trades or acquisitions for these top 6 or top line guys, that just kind of kicks that can further down the road and it pushes them down the lineup more. So I think the Wild have to be really careful this year when looking at their trading and evaluating the players that they already have on the team, because if you want to get more ice time to the guys that you think deserve it, you have to be careful not to trade, go out and do these blockbuster trades and get somebody that's just going to push that down the lineup a lot more. I always go back for whatever reason, when I think about Wild trades, I'm always looking at Montreal just because it seems like the Wild have always had conversations with them. And I think I've never heard any rumors or even possibilities that this player would be available. But someone that I really like is Brendan Gallagher. I know he's he's an assistant captain or an alternate captain. He has a decent contract. He led them in scoring last year. He just seems like a guy that would fit in really well on this Wild team. But he's one of those smaller guys. He's only 5'9", I think. So who knows if Bruce would be on board with something like that. But
when his contract's he's 3.75. I don't know if you just.
Yeah.
good contract.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's a really solid. I agree with that.
Speaking of Montreal, another player that keeps coming up when I'm just like running stuff like on my computer is Victor Mete. Is that how you say it? Mete?
I've never heard of that person.
He's like a left defenseman for the Canadiens. That is, he's 20 years old.
Luke got a left field over
He's
here.
20 years old, and he's got 2 more years on his entry level. And I think that if you're looking for like, I don't know, I have no idea about this guy, but he keeps coming up in a lot of things I've been seeing, and he played like 700 minutes last year, but like that's a pretty like that or like Teuvo Teravainen is another player that I kind of keep seeing pop up, and nobody really talks about.
Not
him.
to completely cut off Derek here, though. I think
Go ahead.
I think Gallagher is
Gallagher, and then maybe I really don't. Where is this guy from? He's from Canada, so it's probably Victor Mete. Mete. I don't know, but
It's probably
that
French,
if
so
you
it's
could
like
maybe try to
Mete.
get a package deal there with Gallagher and this guy. I could see something with the Canadians. I also really like Pacioretty, but I mean he's getting older. But
It's Victor Mete.
is
There
it?
you go.
Okay.
Yeah, if you
That's as
go on
French
Elite
as
Prospects, you know how they have like you can like listen to the players' names now.
Yeah.
Oh,
So that's what I just did. And it's Mete.
Mete. Okay. Yeah, I
but-
don't know who this guy is, but like I see him like, and he keeps coming up as like one of the better defensemen from last year, and like people say, oh, he might have been sheltered, whatever, but he was drafted in the 4th round. He's 20 years old, shoots left. He's paid like $750,000 for the next 2 years, and I don't know. Sounds like everybody thinks Bergevin is a really terrible GM, so maybe you could kind of wrangle him away from them.
And that's the thing with Montreal that always confused me, because like every time I hear about like potential people that are available for trade, it's always like Max Pacioretty and Alex Galchenyuk, which are just like people that, I mean, I think most people are probably more excited about Pacioretty than Galchenyuk at this point. And it just makes me wonder how much they actually value guys like Brendan Gallagher, and maybe someone like that would actually be available too. If they're listening to trades for their captain, why not their alternate also?
Yeah, I agree.
Did Mete get buried in the depth chart when Mike Riley came in? Because Riley showed up and he got like instant like top line minutes.
Too soon.
I forgot, man. It's been Luke and I kind of joke when Luke was on the Hockey Wilderness podcast. He like Tony asked him to make a bold prediction, and Luke had this like big like Mike Riley is going to have a breakout season this year. And I always laugh at it because it's kind of like, yeah, that didn't really turn out the way that you wanted. But I think to get back on the Phil Kessel thing though, I don't like the idea of going after Kessel because I think he makes too much. He's 30. I think from a lot of people don't, and we were kind of going on about this maybe a week or so ago, is that like Phil Kessel is like one of the best kept secrets in the NHL is that he's like horrible defensively. And like, I mean, just terrible. And it's like, sometimes those are fine. Like sometimes you need guys. Like I think that like in that mold where they just are all offense, no defense, but like their offense just is so good that you don't really care about the defensive side. But I'm not quite sure how Kessel would fit in with the current roster in a way that I think really mixes with the team. But he reminds me of like the Wild Eddie Vanek. Like that's what it kind of reminds me of.
Yeah.
And I don't think that worked. I think there's a reason that didn't work, and I don't think the system, I don't know, maybe Boudreaux can do some work, but I don't like the idea of adding Kessel really at all.
You bite your tongue, sir.
So what you're telling me is Phil Kessel, if traded here, would suddenly lose the ability to skate.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, and I don't know, like you said, he's 30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I just don't, like, I don't know, and this is kind of, I think for both Luke and I, it's like, it's difficult, because it's like, I just kind of, I mean, I don't know, I just like the players they have, and I think that there's a lot there still. I think there's a lot of room for bounce back, and I want to see what you have with the younger players. And just like you said, Derek, like if you start signing these guys and you're putting them in top 6 roles, you're just going to basically kind of bury your prospects. And I think that's one of the most important things, in my opinion, this season, that we need to see what we have, or the team needs to see what we have in these prospects that have been kind of hyped up as, from kind of just everybody as like the Wild's at the 4 or 5 guys are like solid. So I don't know. I'm cautious of like a bunch of trades kind of thing.
Wasn't it just the World Juniors in 2017? So that would be not this past year, but the one before it, where everyone was raving about Wild prospects because
Yep.
they had 4 of them on the most prominent roles on each of their
And like
teams.
3 captains and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was Cunning Greenway USA, and then Eric Sneck was in Sweden. Then
Yep.
like pouring out for
Kaprizov. Yep.
Yeah.
Sad trombone.
Yeah.
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 Womp womp. Please flip over to side 2. Wait, this isn't 1993. This is the end of episode 156, part 1 of this podcast. You can check out the end of this, episode 157, part 2. Talk about the NHL draft, recap Stanley Cup final, revisit the moves from last summer, put those to bed, and talk about players we would love to see win the Stanley Cup who haven't yet, now that Alex Ovechkin has finally done that. So that is all waiting for you in part 2, and thanks for listening.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.